need to take action, and we need to put this as one of the priorities of the country, because Tunisians are very resilient, and the Tunisian founders are very resilient. I can tell you that. So if they cannot make it in Tunisia, they would just move and do it somewhere else, right? And this is not what the idea is. And for Tunisians, we really want to see that happen from the country and with the country and because of the country, not despite of the country. So we really, I think what will change the game is if we act now or if we don't.
I'd like to introduce my guest for today's episode, Oussama Messaoud. Oussama, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Majlis Markets.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for having me, Hassan.
Oussama, we met at the Abu Dhabi Finance Week, which was held last month from a mutual friend of ours. And you told me a story about Tunisia and what you've been doing for the last couple of years, or for the past decade or so, helping Tunisian startups, and your background as well in working with startups and helping them get to a better place was really fascinating to me. And I told you about my podcast, and I was really fascinated to talk to you about the Tunisian ecosystem, because I think a lot of people don't know too much about it, and even me, for someone who's covered ecosystems in frontier markets, say like Iraq, Egypt, Saudi Arabia. I know these are markets which are well known to MENA people, but outside of the MENA region, a lot of people wouldn't know this. But Tunisia is an interesting one. I did a little bit of research last night, and over the past few days, I've been doing a bit of research. And to my surprise, there's actually although it's nascent, it's quite a flourishing ecosystem. But before we get into all of that, Oussama, could you give our listeners and viewers your background story to begin with?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I've been like an entrepreneur. I like to call myself like a serial entrepreneur for the past 20 plus years. So I've been very since university, I've been very active in the associative life, and I've been very active in that sense and promoting entrepreneurship and the ability for students to try things, to be entrepreneurs, to try and fail. And that was, I think, part of my, and still is part of my DNA, I guess. I've done some of I started very, very early, just after finishing university. I started my first company back in 2005. And this was just after spending 1 year in the US, building a program between the US and the Arab world for a student exchange, and then back to Tunisia and started my first company. And since then, I've been active in different industries, different sectors, so IT and trade and different trainings, etc. So different, but always with the same energy as an entrepreneur and trying new things. So a lot of failures, some successes. The story of an entrepreneur. In 2016, I started my startup in Tunisia, and at that time there was no such a thing as a startup ecosystem or anything. It was even the word startup had different meanings for different people in Tunisia, and was not something that people understood, or even the model was a strange model. So people would say that a startup is just defined as a small company, or as just two kids in the garage that just developing something or anything. So the interesting thing was that we were not the only crazy people who went and tried to build something based on this model, and we very quickly realized that we could be in a community together, because the ecosystem, as I said, the legal framework was not the best at that time for this kind of endeavors and this kind of journeys, taking too much risks to build something on the long run, and with all the need that you have for capital, for talent, etc. But the legal framework was too old, too classical, and so we said, let's do something. Let's get together first. And then we created a Tunisian Startups Association, which was the umbrella to just get together and tell each other or share our problems, and trying to be together to find solutions when we needed them, and sharing experiences. And after that, we thought that it was the right time to try to change things. So we started to. The ambition was that we get together and do some work in terms of we call it lobbying or whatever, to change things. And the ambition was that we change the whole legal framework that could help startups do that. And very quickly we realized that this was maybe too ambitious, but it would take a lot of time to change things from the foundations. So came the idea to really come with a special legal framework for startups with a specific definition for what a startup is. And maybe this would help the whole ecosystem to adapt at its own pace, but in a very, very, let's say, scalable way, so that we can build on successes and as we go. And we were lucky at that time that the public sector at that time and the government in the country were interested in such a project. So we really built all of this together from the ground up. But this would be maybe debated later in more details. So I can share more how we did it and how this unique experience, I think this is experience led to the first Startup Act in the region, in the continent. And it was my pleasure also to share this experience with different friends and counterparts in different parts of the world. I think it's a very interesting experience that we can
Yeah, and I was like I said, when I was doing the research, the Startup Act of 2018 is I think one of the most pivotal times for Tunisia's ecosystem, albeit it's still very young. But like just Osama, you said you studied in Europe, and before I would say, a lot of people who don't know about Tunisia is that it's a very even pre 2011, it's a very like compared to a lot of the other countries in the region, it was quite developed in terms of its education system. In terms, I think one of the statistics that came to me last night was 40% of startups in Tunisia are led by women. So women are very well integrated in Tunisia. Between that period before 2018, you're saying like there wasn't that much activity. Would you say like Uber's acquisition of Karim or like other examples of this, not just specifically in Tunisia, but like across the region, that kind of spurred the interest in startups?
Yeah, sure. I don't think at the different levels there was the same awareness of that, but yeah, the attention came very early across the Tunisian youth and Tunisian entrepreneurs to this model because, as you said, education is very good in Tunisia. We still are one of the countries that produce most engineers. As you said, also educate for women is very developed. Actually, in Tunisia, graduates from universities are mostly women, and this created like I say special, let's say maybe in the region environment and special conditions for this kind of ecosystem to actually be created in Tunisia. So and still now we don't have like as we also talk about the ecosystem itself, what are the positive sides and what are the shortcomings, etc. One of the things that still is one of the strengths of this ecosystem is the talent that is there, the quality of the talent. A lot of deep tech is happening in Tunisia, and also some of the examples of the successful startups like InstaDeep was the biggest acquisition exit in the African continent for an AI company, was a Tunisian startup, etc. So yes, exactly. Tunisia is a special case, and also what happened. All of this happened also after the 2011 and the change in the all the political system, how people also viewed the new economy of Tunisia, etc. So all the conditions were there actually to really build an ecosystem and to start it from Tunisia.
And then since 2018, obviously with the Startups Act, what else has the government done or what has the authorities done to improve the environment for startups?
So yeah, actually, that's one of the biggest debates still going on in Tunisia. Is we created the Startup Act with a specific purpose, and I think in that purpose was met, which is to build startups, to build Tunisian startups, and to encourage founders from different backgrounds to go and build their own startups. So this was a goal that was met, and in that sense, we can say that the first version of that legal framework was successful. The problem is that after that, we couldn't really develop and improve that legal framework and learn from what we've done. So we created a lot of startups. We gave them the possibility to we took down some of the problems that they were facing, like access to hard currency, like access to capital in early stage phases. So in that sense, we developed also an ecosystem of investment at the early stages. But then came the gap of the growth capital. Then came the gap of how to expand from Tunisia and being regional and global by design, but from Tunisia, and having the right exit strategies, and having clear exit pathways for the startups that could continue to develop their activities from Tunisia. So this gave little visibility for those startups because they remained confined in their Tunisian ecosystem. And then we started to see some cross-border setups where the founders would at some point go and create another startup in another country and then link those two entities. And this is where we started to see some more successes. So all the successes that happened at some point had to do that. So even when I was still very active in the ecosystem as a civil society through the association, etc. This was one of the main subjects that we were fighting for and trying to convince the authorities of the importance of that. And we succeeded into arriving at one point where we have a draft for a second version where we introduced some more. We opened up more, and we included some more categories of companies into the scope of that act, and we called it the Innovation Act, no more the Startup Act. So we wanted to make like a strong message and a strong statement that it's not about creating a specific framework for a specific type of companies that have a label that gives us certain criteria. So it's not an exclusive act; it's more an inclusive one where we welcome all the companies. So we wanted Tunisia to be a welcoming ecosystem for all the companies to innovate, to create their own products, and have the ambition of becoming global and through this pathway. So yeah, I think this is something that still needs to be done, and I think we are losing a lot of time by not updating upgrading and updating the legal framework. And this is something that needs always to be put on the table again, and I think it's really crucial to do it.
Tunisia is not like a big population like Egypt or other countries in the region. What features stand out for Tunisia that make it like a good or an attractive place for a VC ecosystem?
Actually, as I said, for an early stage phase where you have access to very, very good talent with really actually not that big costs, and also have all the incentives that you have as a startup through the Startup Act, and being able to really use the money that you are bootstrapping, or use the money that you have from investors into the product, because you don't pay some of the taxes, you don't pay some of the social contributions and things like that. You have access to foreign investments, and you can keep the foreign currency and you can use it freely, which is something not possible for any other type of companies in Tunisia. So this gives you like a real acceleration at that phase. And you could really, Tunisia is a small market, but it's a good market for testing. So it's a good market for validation, etc. So this is what these are the strengths I could think of in terms of Tunisia as a small market. And you have like some features that can be leveraged to really create a very dynamic ecosystem of startup. After that comes the question of the design of the startup. Be a Tunisian startup, a very local startup that works in the Tunisian market, or is it designed to be a startup that tests in Tunisia but is global or regional, at least at the design? So yeah, even the criteria of giving the label for the startups has evolved in Tunisia. So in the beginning, the most important metric was how many startups did we deliver a label to? How many startups did we create? So even in terms of what is the activity, etc., in the beginning was not that selective, let's say. But it evolved. It became more selective, more more framed in terms of who should be the startups that have the label and have access to the incentives, etc. So it's evolving, but yeah, you really have to see it as a test, as a very good launchpad. But at some point, you'll have to consider really having the link with another ecosystem where it's easier to grow and to scale.
And by extension, Osama, what sectors do you think Tunisian startups and scale ups have the biggest opportunities? Because you could talk about things like AI, blue ocean, these kind of things. What sectors do you think are the ones to look out for?
Think I think should be today. If you see the profile of the talents that you have, it's around AI, it's around deep tech in general, it's around infrastructure for fintech or this kind of sectors. I think we are very strong as an ecosystem in that, and this can be a real differentiator because we have we have the talents for that. We have also, as I said, the possibility to test things, to try things at very low cost. So yeah, I think it should be positioned strategically. Tunisia should be positioned on that, and it's naturally positioned on these sectors.
From a founder's perspective, what are some of the opportunities and risks, do you think? Do you think there's, or rather, how should founders, Tunisian founders or founders who set up in Tunisia, how should they think about things like risk and growth and opportunity?
I think the from a mindset perspective for a founder in Tunisia, I think the conditions in general shaped or conditioned the founders to be very resilient and to be also very good at managing the money that they have or the resources that they have, which is a good thing because when you are, we always say as Tunisians, if you can make it in Tunisia, you can make it everywhere in the world. It's not a bad thing actually. It could look like maybe being very rough on the Tunisia, but it's not. It's actually a quality of the Tunisians, and it allowed us to always find a way out and to always be resilient. Being very good for example, at managing the money you have and optimizing the burn rate for your startups is very good. But at some point, it becomes like an enemy for growth, right? It slows you down at some point because you're not putting all the resources you have to allocate to build quickly and to grow quickly. I think in terms of risks, the biggest risk for a founder is to run out of money and giving the gap in the scaling or in the growth capital today. This is very understandable, but I think how to bridge that, giving the situation and giving all the conditions. I think it's still the same playbook. Really test very quickly, leverage all the advantages you have in Tunisia as a founder to build very quickly and to be regional by design and to scale very quickly and to grow very quickly through other ecosystems that could work for your product or that could work for your service.
One thing, Osama, that just came to my mind is, you know, back in 2011, the IMF put out an interesting report on entrepreneurship in, I think, Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, and a few other countries as well. This was just before the uprisings began in 2011.
Yeah.
And one of the authors, they made a note in the notes. If you read the notes, the back of the report, they said they talked about a cultural study, that there's a cultural perception of failure in these societies since 2011. I know that was like 15 years ago. Do you think that kind of cultural mindset has changed, where, you know, if you fail, okay, you can start again and do something else? Or do you think there's still that cultural stigma of failure?
There's still, I think, like a short answer is there's still this stigma around failure, and funny enough, even the Startup Act framework has taken note of that. So one of the biggest additions that the Startup Act added to the general legal framework in Tunisia is that it created this, in a way, safety net in different ways for people to be able to fail without first risking everything, and also being able to restart again if that's possible. So different things. This shows you that this is a real thing actually in Tunisia. So you can, for example, the mechanism of shutting down a company, a startup, very easily by agreement of the shareholders and through a guarantee fund, something like that, and also the possibility for you to leave your job at a private or a public company and being able to get it back after 1 year or 2 years if you don't succeed. Things like that try to encourage people and get them out of that mindset where failure is like it's not just a stigma, but it's like if it happens, and your fate is sealed in a way. You cannot run companies again. You are stigmatized as a loser, or this is culturally it still is the case, but at least the legal aspect try to work around that.
Interesting. Osama, one thing I don't like making comparisons with countries, but I'm quite familiar with the Iraqi VC ecosystem and the Egyptian as well. And one of the things that people say to me is, or investors say, and also founders as well, is about scale ups. You talked about startups at Founder. I'm assuming you're talking about seed and pre-seed and seed. But for the scale ups, do you think that's attracting investment for scale ups where they were at past Series A, B, C, or whatever? Do you think that's a challenge for some of these scale ups within Tunisia?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. It's not a challenge for some of them; it's a challenge for all of them. Actually, at some point, even through through the Startup Act, if you reach a certain size in terms of people, in terms of revenue, then you are not considered a startup anymore, and then you lose all the incentives. So was also one of the things that we are pushing to change, which is it's not okay to remove incentives or to how to say to jeopardize the activity of a company, of a Tunisian company that succeeded actually. So it doesn't make sense. You could lose your label because of a lack of compliance or because you didn't grow quick enough or whatever. But you cannot lose it because you succeeded. So the engineering of the law, as I said, was to create the first startups and create that pipeline of Tunisian startups, but it was not designed to do the follow up or to really help them go to the next step. So this is a structural problem within the law. So this is why it's always the case. 100% of the startups that could make it and could grow, because you cannot. I mean, from a systemic point of view, from a structural point of view, you cannot grow in Tunisia because the market is small. Not only because of the law, but if you want to succeed, you have to go and if you want to grow, you have to go and do it on a dual structure where you have another entity somewhere else in the world, and then you optimize that.
Osama, one thing I wanted to ask you is who are funding a lot of these startups? Are they like international VCs? Are they domestic VCs or regional VCs? And then tied to that, obviously at pre-seed and seed, you have different forms of financing. So I guess at the initiation stage, you're giving away sums of equity. And then as you get more in your journey, you do like debt or venture debt or safe notes if you want to do something like that. Could you walk us through or tell our listeners and viewers like what kind of how financing is done for startups in Tunisia?
So even this evolved, of course. So in the early days, it's still mostly domestic VCs. But in the early days, even the VC in itself, the VC model in itself was not present really. Like it was like the classical investors, bankers who are trying to cope with that new with this new way of investing and trying to find ways of putting money in those startups. So it was always they learned, and we had some very good VCs actually in Tunisia, and private ones, and also with the fund of funds that was also part of the startup Tunisia program, was one of mechanism that's also now is allowing child funds, but still at early stages. We still didn't solve the growth the growth capital, but at early stages you now have different options for startups for investment, and also it brings some of the public money into the VC, and also it brings some of the international capital also through those child funds. So it's bringing more diversity in terms of the potential for investment. But yes, it's still very limited to the early stage, very much.
And where does Tunisia sit within the MENA VC ecosystem, do you think? I know it's a bit unfair to compare. Like I said before, it's not right to compare countries, but within the regional ecosystem, how would you say Tunisia is doing compared to some of the regional peers? And also tied to that as well, sorry to ask two questions in one, but why do you think a lot of Gulf investors ignore what's happening in Tunisia?
Yeah, that's. I would start with the second question. Actually, I think again is the question of the markets. So I think the market is too small, and I think they don't see it as a market to invest, or maybe they even don't see it at all. I think there's a lack of visibility also in terms of the exit pathways. There is no real track record of how these Tunisian startups are exiting, and we need to still build up on this track record, even though we've had some very nice stories. But yeah, still the visibility is too small. I think also maybe it gets better when those startups are regional by design. Again, when those startups are meant to really start in Tunisia, but then to go by design to those expansion markets very quickly. I think in that sense, we've seen some of the those investments happening in Tunisian startups from the region, from the Gulf region, from Egyptian VCs. We've seen also some of those investments happening. Um, and yeah, I think this is it's mostly a problem of visibility, either in both in terms of markets as a size, and also in terms of the visibility of the exits and the visibility of the startups in general.
Yeah, no, it seems that Egypt and Saudi Arabia and UAE, of course, and Bahrain as well, seem to get a lot of the publicity. But one thing that came into my mind, Osama, is if you talk to people like Philip Bahushi from Magnet, not just him but others as well, who collect this data on startups within the region, do you think there's a lack of like disclosure and quality of data and transparency as well, which is also hurting this growth?
Totally agree. Yeah, 100%. And this reminds me of the struggle that we've been having to really collect information about the nascent ecosystem back in the days. We were trying to really make sense of what's happening. And even like I remember the Smart Tunisia, which was the entity responsible for managing the whole startup Tunisia program. We're trying and really working hard to get all this information about the startups, what's happening, numbers, etc. And I think produced one or two annual reports, and after that they stopped doing that because it was too much work, but and also not very relevant actually, because you don't have enough data, you don't have really the data to draw conclusions or to anything. So I think this is still a problem. We don't know how today. I think we don't know exactly how many startups we still have in terms of label startups, who are still alive, who are not, what stage they are in. Do they have like regional or international branches? Do they? We still don't have those kind of information. How much revenue they do? How many people in the team? So yeah, of course. This is also under the visibility of the ecosystem in itself. And when I say visibility, it means also how performing is this ecosystem, what's happening there, and data is very important to determine that.
I don't want to be sound crude, but when you talk to international VCs, the likes of Kleiner Perkins or Sequoia, these big ones, or in Europe as well, and in Asia as well. But when you speak to a lot of these guys, a lot of them say it's all about deal flow and quality. The quality of deal flow.
Yeah.
Isn't it part of the fact that not just Tunisia as well, but the region generally, the quality of the deal flow is not that great? And you see headlines as well of these startups raising funding, but in terms of the international VCs getting into the region, I know they're there on the ground, but like you don't see like a lot of these big stories. Like, do you think it's to do with deal flow quality as well?
Yeah, as I told you again, it's a systematic and a structural problem, because all the ecosystem was, or the framework designed for the ecosystem has a unique goal, is quantity actually. As I told you, even though it's getting better now, but at the beginning, the quality was not the main criteria. So if you had something, if you developed anything, it doesn't matter if it can scale or not. It doesn't matter if it's regional or not. Anyway, it's like you could develop at some point like a marketplace and get your label, and that's it. So I understand that, because you needed to really kickstart all of this and start having your first stories, and having trying things and learning, etc. But yeah, but this had some very important impacts on the quality of the deal flow, and I think I even understand that this would be the main goal at the beginning, but the whole idea and the story was that we will have a new updated framework after 2 3 years, and that would have made sense if we have really leverage all what we created and all the because Startup Act didn't only create that ecosystem in Tunisia, it's also created a story around Tunisia. And Tunisia started to really be on the map of innovation, to be there as a one of its kind ecosystem, building startups at a very quick pace. And also it was a model in how you can change or how you can make policies in a very collaborative way between different players, and how efficient it was to create that framework. So it was a real success story. And I remember I was in a panel in Addis at the African Union at some point to share the story of the Startup Act of Tunisia. And I was in the panel with someone from the, I think, Ministry of Technology in Senegal, I think. And he was telling me how how they created their Startup Act and how the Tunisian Startup Act was one of their main references, and how they used it to really also accelerate the design and the implementation of their own framework. And these kind of stories really positioned Tunisia at some point as one of the as inspiring stories in that sense. And I think we lost that also. We lost that momentum because we couldn't really leverage that and build like a second version, a third iteration, a fourth iteration that would have made the story relevant, and that would have cut the problem of the quality of the deal flow and everything.
You know, you mentioned something earlier about a lack of a track record of exits. Other than InstaDeep, do you know any like notable ones that have had like an exit, whether it's through merger, through acquisition, or through IPO or something? Has there been any other examples?
Yeah, I remember what I think I forgot the name, but it was a gaming platform also
Ah, yes, yeah, yeah, I've heard about this one.
that was acquired by a Egyptian company. We have Save My Wardrobe also. We have the other Dapchi also from Tunisia that was also expanded also then in the Egyptian market and could raise other rounds outside of Tunisia and could grow. So I remember some examples, but the thing is that those examples we we could we could list them easily. That's the problem. And the problem is that we could list them easily, and they are very, very good examples that Tunisian startups could make it and can make it. But again, they made it at some point because because they were first designed to be not only Tunisian but regional or global. And at some point, they found the right partner, and also they chose wisely their expansion markets, which accelerated their growth.
Do you think one of the challenges in a lot of markets is that, say, for example, a founder starts up startup in their home country, and then they realize they can't really go further with this, whether it's through the financing or through the expansion in the market, and then they decide to move to a country like France or the UK or somewhere like that? Has there been like things like that with Tunisian startups?
That's been the case for a lot of startups, actually. Yes. So most of them would not just cut the ties with Tunisia. Most of them would create another entity somewhere else, and they would keep the Tunisian entity. But it's still very complicated also to do that in a very compliant way with the Tunisian law and regulations, etc. Because you have to make sure that you are compliant, that you create either you create a branch through the right channels, or if you get acquired by your foreign entity, then you have to make sure that it's compliant also. So it's really walking on how do you say it? Walking on fire or something like that.
Working on us, yeah.
You really have to be very, very careful. Most of the this happened a lot with a lot of startups actually. Yes,
It just seems to me that, you know, there's a lot of DFIs, development financial institutions, like the World Bank, like the EDB, like others, Islamic Development Bank as well. But it just seems like a lot of people forget about Tunisia too much. Do you think? And like, if you look at the FDI levels, they're not as big as they should be, in my opinion, for what Tunisia has to offer. Like, what can Tunisia do to encourage more FDI or encourage more people to set up in the country from a financing perspective?
I don't know if it's from from a financial perspective or in general, but I think Tunisia needs to show more openness, to show that it's eager to really open its market and open its systems to the rest of the world. I think Tunisia, at some point, the African Development Bank was headquartered in Tunisia, actually. Had a lot of and this had this at that period, it had a huge impact on Tunisia as an economic destination in general, on the investments and everything, because it's first like a sign of validation, or a sign of a positive signal for investors and for economic players in general. And I think Tunisia at that point was much more open in terms of economic policies, and also in terms of incentives for investment in general. It's not that Tunisia since then put more restrictive laws or anything, but I think Tunisia unfortunately couldn't keep up with the pace, with the global pace, and automatically you find yourself falling behind, because things are changing, and you are changing at a very and at a much lower pace. So I think uh, reform needs to be done in terms of first having a vision for the country. And I remember at some point we had and we led as a social, sort of civil society, also the this movement of having like a vision for the country, a new vision for the country, how we wanted to see Tunisia as a economic player in general, and how to attract capital, and how to attract talent, and how to be like a real hub for the region, and for the world, actually, because Tunisia has different advantages, natural, let's say, advantages that places the country in the crossroads between different cultures and different markets. Say in the heart of Africa, as a country that gave its name to Africa from a symbolic point of view, but also geographically very close to Europe, part of the world, part of the Muslim world, Mediterranean by nature. So it's really in the crossroad of all of these markets and all of these cultures, and could position itself very easily as a hub from an economic and financial perspective. We wanted to have that, and I think we still need to push, because Tunisia is a small country. It is a small market, which is also an advantage, because you could change things very easily, very quickly, if you take 2, 3, 4 good decisions in terms of where you want to be and where you want to go. Then things could change very easily. And Tunisia is still having like I think Tunisia still has a good image. Still is perceived as a very promising country, and I get this from all the conversations I have with people. People, I think, see Tunisia in a positive way. I think because also they know the potential that the country has. And I think if we do if we take the right decisions in the coming like 1 to 2 years, I think we can turn the things upside down, and we can reposition Tunisia on the.
Is there like a Tunisian version of Shark Tank where, entrepreneurs can come and pitch ideas? Because like even in places like Bahrain, which is a much smaller population than Tunisia, they have like their own local versions of these. Do you think does Tunisia have something like this?
Yeah, we had something like this, and it was very successful, actually. This was really in the years just after the passing of the law, and it was like really in that dynamic, and we could see this kind of see those projects and those initiatives, and people could see them, and it was also a good way to educate people around what these young people are doing, and what they are creating, and how this can have an impact on the lives of people and on the economy of the country. So it was really positive. And I also there's also one of the shows, I hope it's still up, where we it's like a Shark Tank, but it's for smaller, for kids, actually. So people also loved that, and it was very successful, and it gave hope, actually. So I think maybe today this would have less impact, actually, Hassan, because I think today there are deeper challenges for those founders that need to really flourish and grow, needs access to capital, need easier way of doing business in Tunisia, and to have access to talent in Tunisia, etc. So I think maybe the impact would be less if we do it today. I think today we should focus on more fundamental challenges, and try to solve the one or two of those challenges. And that would give, I think, the ecosystem, let's say, a jump start again. And the best thing that could happen to Tunisia is to really have today a real discussion around the Innovation Act, and a real discussion around what we want for the country in the coming 10 years, and how we could leverage what we have and what we learned and all the failures that we had and all the successes, because we had a lot of successes actually during this experience. And I think we could do this very quickly because we have now we have learnings, we have data, even if it's not very big. We have data today and we have experience, and we can learn from that, and we can go much quicker, I think.
As you bring the podcast to a close, actually, like, it actually leads nicely to the last few questions I wanted to ask you, or the last part of the podcast was, Osama, where do you see the next 3 to 5 years going for the Tunisian ecosystem?
Yeah, it depends what we do today. If we take action today, and if we really, I think it's not about being aware of the situation, because I think people are aware at the government level, at the private level, at the civil society level. I think everyone is aware, but we need to take action. We need to take action, and we need to put this as one of the priorities of the country, because Tunisians, as I told you, are very resilient, and the Tunisian founders are very, very, very resilient. I can tell you that. So if they cannot make it in Tunisia, they would just move and do it somewhere else, right? And this is not what the idea is. And for Tunisians, we really want to see that happen from the country and with the country and because of the country, not despite of the country. So I think what will change the game is if we act now or if we don't. If we act now, I think we can see a very flourishing ecosystem in the coming 5 years, because if we can help those founders to have access to capital for their growth, if we can help more investors to really come and consider the Tunisian ecosystem and trust it and put money in it, if we can also give hope for Tunisian talent to stay in the country and contribute to that, and if we can also encourage international talent to come to Tunisia and give them the possibility to come and to work in Tunisian startups, with Tunisian startups, or bring their own ideas and build them in Tunisia, because they have access to a good legal framework, because they have access to a great pool of talents at very good prices, because they have access to infrastructure, because they have access to a very good internet coverage, because they have access to all of this, then it can go very quickly, Hassan. It can go very quickly. And we've seen it, like what changes happened in 3 years just because of one law that was developed with everyone, where everyone was motivated and everyone was willing to do the right thing. It changed the face of the country. Really, it changed the face of the country in real life, on the ground, but even in terms of perception of how the country was perceived. And this is, I think, in terms of finance, in terms of capital, in terms of investment, the number one criteria is how you perceive the environment in where you will go to take the risk of investing your money.
Osama, tell us any projects you're working on, any upcoming projects you're working on.
Yeah, personally, I don't know if you mentioned that, but I moved to the Emirates, and specifically Dubai, since 2 years ago. And as an entrepreneur and as being in the startup ecosystem, what I'm doing today is still connected to that. So I work on the startup support and the bridging markets. So between the African market, the GCC and Middle East in general. So this is my day-to-day work and what I focus on today, but also supporting ecosystem players in different parts of the world with building the right innovation strategies, whether it's at a nationwide, at a government level, or is at a corporate level. But what I'm really working on, I'm really excited about as a project is we are building our own VC fund, because we want to invest in our startups. We want to be part of their journey in a more integrated way. This part of VC investment is something that is very exciting for me, and it's one of the projects I'm most excited about.
Fantastic. And Osama, how can people find out more about the Tunisian ecosystem?
So yeah, today, if to find out more about the Tunisian ecosystem, you can you can reach out to the ecosystem players, either the private, public, or civil society players. So you can have a look at all the Tunisian Startups Association. You can have a look at Smart Tunisia, the Startup Tunisia program, and these are you will find resources there about the ecosystem and what's happening in the ecosystem. And also, yeah, if you need any insights or any guidance in finding out more about the Tunisian ecosystem, you can also reach out to me directly. I can guide you in finding the right information or getting the right insights about the Tunisian VC/startup ecosystem.
I was listening to your podcast that you did, I think, 3 years ago. Um, so it's in Tunisian Arabic, so I'll link it in the show notes. But if anyone's interested in that, and I think the best way to reach you is on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best way to reach me. Yes.
I'll link it in the show notes. But Oussama Messaoud, this has been a really great conversation. I'm really happy to learn about the Tunisian ecosystem and to find out there is actually some positive stories happening despite all the global turmoil and everything. But thanks for coming on this podcast.
Thank you, Hassan, for having me. I enjoyed the conversation as well, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you.